Thank you for tuning in and checking out Unlucky, a Memoir. My name is Kat. Everyone has a story. This one just happens to be mine. Last week I said that I wanted to talk about stigma this week, and it's becoming a little bit of a passion project, an important thing for me. And I can talk about, I had a speaking engagement at a facility to funders, supporters. Um, and I remember they asked a question of one of the people that were speaking before me that were employees of the treatment center, directors and such. And I remember them asking, what is the biggest barrier you face in getting people into treatment and providing recovery services? And there was different answers that were given. One of them was funding, one of them housing, and I'm sitting in the back waiting for my turn to get up there, just wanting to say, no, that's not the biggest barrier. So when I got up and shared my story and my experiences with recovery and addiction, I worked in what I feel is the biggest barrier to entry, and that is stigma. Like with my addiction, the drugs and alcohol were a symptom. They weren't the problem, because if drugs and alcohol were the problem, when people got them out of their system, they wouldn't go back. There's underlying issues. So the symptoms are the drugs and alcohol. Just like funding and housing are symptoms of a deeper rooted problem, and that's stigma, because the stigma keeps people set in certain beliefs on what addiction is, on what recovery is, on percentages of success and failure. Um, and if there wasn't for that stigma, people would feel better about donating and funding these services. People would feel better about recovery centers or sober livings opening up near where they live. But George Carlin said it a long time ago when he was talking about prisons and stuff. NIMBY, not in my backyard. And the stigma behind the addiction and recovery keep people from really truly understanding that people do recover. We do recover. In the research I've been doing, you look up online, you can look percentages of success in recovery, in long-term sustained recovery, and you can get an answer anywhere from 75% all the way down to 11% success rates. So where do you go? Whose statistics do you listen to? And it comes down that statistics, it's a moving scale, and to follow along with that and believe in that is kind of silly, because first off, it's a self-reported statistic. I know throughout my recovery and addiction, I never went to anybody and reported how long I stayed in sobriety, how long I was in my recovery. I never reported that I relapsed. So in talking to a few other people, none of them did either. They were never asked or talked to about it. So who's self-reporting these statistics? And you can look at it a few ways. Like if you're somebody who's suffering from addiction and looks at those statistics, you can look at it like, well, I'm never going to make it, or I'm going to be one of the people that do. What part of those statistics do you want to influence? Do you want to keep dragging them down, or do you want to push them up? I had an instance when I first got here, and I'm going to get more into this story next week. I went and checked myself in on a 72-hour psych hold when I got to Denver. While I was in there, I was admitted and taken into the mental health ward. And when the doctor came and saw me, she told me, she goes, "You're not suicidal. You're a homeless drug addict looking for a warm place to stay." And proceeded to tell me that they were going to let me spend the evening there, but in the morning I had to leave. And she said a lot of things like, I don't know why you came to Colorado. We have the worst mental health and addictions treatment services in the country, which isn't true at all. I found some amazing treatment services here. Mental health, there's people that care here. And to me, the way she looked at me felt like it came out of stigma. And I understand that she's probably had a lot of negative interactions with unhoused drug addicts that formed this opinion in her that blanket statements, every person who's suffering from addiction or is unhoused doesn't really have a problem other than that. And that's how stigma's formed. You have a certain few instances, or you see a few news reports. Uh, you talk to some friends who had some negative experiences, and then the stigma starts forming and the belief starts coming. I know a person I talked to that was saying, why even bother? Does anybody even stay in recovery? Does everybody even stay sober? I've been on the streets with all the people who have failed. And to that, I asked him again, where were you? And he said he was on the streets using with people who had tried recovery and failed. And I said, maybe you should change the crowd you're hanging out with. Because I know, for me personally, when you're surrounded by water, you're in the middle of the ocean surrounded by water, it's very easy to start to believe that land no longer exists because of what my surroundings tell me. But that's only as far as I can see. I told him, have faith because I have found solid ground. I have found the foundation that I can build in recovery. And the people I surround myself in recovery are in sustained long-term recovery. And there's a lot of them. It just depends on where you're hanging out. If you're hanging out with a bunch of people who are still using, of course, you're going to see failure. If you hang out with the success stories, that's what you're going to see. And I'm not disillusioned by the fact that, and thinking everybody who attempts this is going to get it. But that's not for me to decide. That's for each individual to decide, because my path to recovery is my path and it's worked for me. And a few years ago, if you would have ran into me, you would think different than you do about me today. And I had to have that conversation with a few people that I consider friends that had misunderstandings about addiction and harm reduction and things of that nature, that they looked at like they're just going to use more if Narcan's available. And I had to point out, I said, do you drive more recklessly because you have a seatbelt in your car? No, it's harm reduction. But the stigma told him that an addict is going to use and not get clean. They're never going to recover. Why waste time and money? And that's when I told him, I go, if you would have met me a few years ago, you'd be thinking the same thing about me, that I was a waste of time, a waste of resources. But because I found some people who didn't have the stigma behind addiction and recovery, I found help. And in this past year and a half, 2 years, I've taken all the courses to become a certified addictions technician. I pivoted career paths, and I'm in the process of being certified as a peer support specialist in the state of Colorado. I am also a housing manager for a treatment facility. And I've said this before on here, this is a life that wasn't even a speck on the horizon a few years ago. I couldn't fathom this. I was at such a pit of hopelessness. And I'm going to revisit and share that story on what got me to Colorado, the journey to the point of recovery, and everything in between. But leading up to that, the stigma even affected me. The stigma helped keep me in my addiction longer than I probably needed to be. The stigma led me to believe that I wasn't capable of recovery. There's a line in the big book and the basic text that says some of us are constitutionally capable of becoming honest with ourselves. And I had to question if that was me or not. But somebody just pointed out the other day when we were having this conversation that if I had to think about that question, then that definitely wasn't me. So the stigma led me to believe that I wasn't worthy of hope. I wasn't worthy of help. I also bought into the fact that why bother going to seek treatment because nobody's going to help me anyway. And that stigma can get deep rooted internally within an addict. It did with me. And I truly believed that this was going to be my life. Well, when I was sitting unhoused and addicted, that was it. Every day was going to be the same. Nothing was ever going to change. I was never going to get better. But as we see, that's not true. I am truly blessed to have situations happen in my life, the people that helped me along this path, and to give back to them on a regular basis whenever I can. So, part of that, I want to give a big thank you to a few of the doctors at Denver Health. I want to give a thank you to the Stout Street Clinic for being there in my dire hour of need, my brother and my family for being some of my biggest cheerleaders and supporters. I also want to thank the Denver Rescue Mission and the New Life program for not promising me a new life, but giving me every opportunity to achieve one. I want to thank Flatirons Community Church for accepting me and giving me a community I can rely on and lean on and grow in. I'd just like to thank all the people I've met along this path that have helped me along this journey to become a better person. And the journey's not over, it's just beginning. And I said this in one of the early videos, right? The goal for me is not to be better than any of my peers. The goal is to be better than the person I was yesterday. And I think I'm achieving that and doing my best and moving forward. So I want to thank you all for coming along this journey with me and following along with my story. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. With that being said, I'll catch you all next week.